This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
G'day, I'm Troy Dean from WP Elevation, and I'm super chuffed to have with me here in episode 7 of the WP Elevation Podcast, Shawn Hesketh from WP101. How are you, man?
Doing great, Troy. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolute pleasure. For those of you that don't know, Shawn Hesketh is the man behind WP101, which is a suite of video tutorials to teach you how to use WordPress, and also the WP101 plugin, which you give to your clients to teach them how to use WordPress. And some of you might be thinking, well, that's a bit weird because that's what you and video user manuals do. So what are you talking to this dude for? And we're going to talk about that during this podcast. So before we get into the meat and the sandwich, so to speak, quick announcement for a competition we're running. We're going to give away a $50 Amazon voucher for you to buy your favorite business book or whatever it is, whatever book you want to get next from Amazon. So stick around for details on how you can win that $50 Amazon voucher a little bit later on. All right, and by the way, I'm in Amsterdam right now. I've just come from WordCamp Europe. I'm on one screen in my little hotel room, and I've got my iPad over here with a question. So if I keep looking over there, that's why I'm doing that. All right, Shawn, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I think like a lot of others, I wanted to be an astronaut initially. I was full tilt space geek. You know, I had this manual that we bought from the local space down in Huntsville, Alabama. They had the space center there. I actually bought this manual on space shuttle operations, and it had the entire dialogue between, the pilots and mission control, and I had most of that memorized. So I knew I was going to be an astronaut, but over time, and once I got in high school, I took architectural drafting. Really decided, not astronaut, but architectural drafting. I really enjoyed that kind of technical drawing, and that kind of lent over the years to an interest in graphic design, which is where I ended up. So cool. Yeah, initially astronaut, but seeing the trailer for Gravity, the movie, has cured me of all of that. There's no interest in being an astronaut at all ever.
Excellent. And when did you discover the web?
Well, like I said, I've always been a geek a bit, I guess. So it had to have been early 90s. I mean, we had dial-up connections and CompuServe and Gopher searches and all that kind of stuff. So, I had one of the first discs from Earthlink, and, that's how I kind of discovered using the internet. But it wasn't until, mid-90s, I guess, that I started actually using it for clients.
Right. And do you remember the first time you saw the WordPress dashboard?
Oh, that would have been, long about version 2.1 or so. And I had already been doing web design for some time, but, largely doing like brochure style sites for my customers. I'd been using, WYSIWYG products like Adobe PageMill. I don't know if you remember that product or not, way back in the day. It was a godsend for designers like us because, being a print designer, I could easily leverage those skills and create websites. But most of the sites were brochure style, for our customers. And over time, that was a good 10 years of building those types of sites. But my clients wanted to, be able to edit their own information, make little changes to their website without having to call and hire the web designer every time they wanted to make changes. So first time I saw the dashboard of WordPress, I played around with it as a blog for myself first. But back then, you really had to kind of jump through hoops to use it to build a full-out business site. And so I did a lot of that in the early days, but I saw potential early on, for using that for client sites. And so as quickly as possible, I began using that for my customers.
Yeah. It's a really common story, like it's this really, really common answer. Well, I started using it for my own blog, and then I started realizing that it could be used for client sites because they wouldn't have to ask me so many questions about how to use it, and I wouldn't have to update it for them. And yeah, it's a really common thread. So when did you realize that teaching WordPress to others was an idea worth pursuing?
I think it probably came shortly after I released my first client site using WordPress. So I was convinced this was going to be a great tool for them. But, as soon as you showed them the dashboard, they became kind of overwhelmed. They liked the idea, of being able to edit their own site. But as soon as you showed them so I started doing these, personalized face-to-face training sessions with my customers one-on-one, and then we just build it into the client, into the project cost. But after doing dozens of these, personalized face-to-face training sessions, I thought, man, there's got to be a better way to deliver this training. So that's how the idea to the first idea to record a series of screencasts came about. And my idea was at that point to just provide this to my clients, and it was a way to free up my time, but also provide a resource for them that they could return to, later if they needed to, and refresh their memory and those kinds of things. So, almost immediately I saw the potential, for using WordPress for client sites, but then shortly after that was the need to educate clients and provide this resource that they could come back to again and again.
It's really interesting. I've been here for a few days here, and we just had WordCamp Europe in Leiden, which is about 20 minutes out of Amsterdam. About 700 people, lots of conversations about WordPress, and it's really interesting that there's this overarching thing that WordPress is easier to use than anything else on the market. Yet you forget, if you're brand new to it, you forget how difficult the onboarding process is. Like, the onboarding process for WordPress is really daunting. I mean, there is no onboarding process really if you've never used it before. We were having that conversation, and people were saying over the weekend, no, it's pretty easy to use. It's pretty easy to use. And I was saying, really? I know a couple of blokes that have actually built businesses out of the fact that there is no onboarding process. I'm actually interviewing him, tomorrow night for our podcast. So it just goes to show,
absolutely.
How daunting would it be using other open source CMSs that aren't as easy as WordPress? I mean, WordPress is the easiest, it has the largest market share, but the onboarding process still leaves a lot to be desired, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And, when I first started, I think I experimented with Drupal and Joomla, which at the time were, night and day to WordPress. I mean, they were incredibly complicated. And over the years, they've, at least Drupal has become a little easier to use. They kind of model a little more after WordPress. I know Drupal folks would probably hate to hear me say that, but they're a lot more similar these days than they were in those early days. And the Joomla was just incredibly complex, although it was being used for a lot of enterprise level work and those kind of things. I think at the time, WordPress was probably the easiest tool, but you're absolutely right. We hear from WordPress beginners all the time. That's who we're serving, and these folks find it very complicated, and it can be daunting. It can be overwhelming. In fact, I have people sometimes email me and say, "If this is as easy as it gets, then I'm in over my head. I've overestimated this." So yeah.
All right, let's talk about today, Shawn Hesketh in WP101 and the year 2013. How do you explain what you do to people? What's your kind of one-sentence elevator pitch?
Well, I think the elevator pitch is just I teach people how to build and manage their own websites without having to hire a web designer every time they want to make a small change. And folks really enjoy that. I find it's not really beneficial to lead off with, I teach WordPress. Most folks don't know who that is. Most of the people that I'm dealing with, they're beginners. So WordPress, what is that? So that kind of branches, but they understand building and managing your own website using a web browser. Tell me more. And so that's kind of the elevator pitch for WP101.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge opportunity there, to help folks understand what exactly WordPress is. But we introduce them to that later down the road.
Yeah, it's really interesting though. I didn't know what your elevator pitch was. So this isn't scripted, kids. We haven't rehearsed this. But what I really like about your elevator pitch is that it doesn't mention WordPress. And your elevator pitch is actually just outlining the benefit that the person is going to receive. And then if they want to dig into it more, then you can start talking about the technology behind it. But initially, you don't talk about the technology because chances are they don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I find, by connecting, at the end of the day, folks have in mind what their goals are. So they know why they need to build a website, or, what it is that they're interested in, in doing online, whether it's a blog, it's somebody who just wants to, have an online journal, a place to share their thoughts, or somebody who wants to build a full-out e-commerce site. So, rather than introducing them to the tools, I prefer folks understand, well, we've got a roadmap to help you get there. And by the way, it involves this product, but we can introduce them to that over time.
Awesome. What do you spend most of your time actually doing day to day?
I think almost all of my time is spent building relationships, whether it's, networking online, connecting people on Twitter, those kinds of things, or it's actually serving our own members, answering WordPress questions in our forum, or, those types of things, or doing pre-sales questions. it's just interfacing with people and interacting with them all day long. And so that's how I spend all my time. When I'm not actively recording screencasts and tutorials, which is, as you know, is the opportunity to go close the door, disappear in a cave for a little while. I do the recording and then come out. But I think, framing it that way helps me too, just to stay focused on what's important. And what is important is these people on the other questions and trying to some point. So how can I help them get from point A to point B?
Yeah, awesome, cool. What's the one thing that keeps you awake at night?
Well, I guess the holy grail of passive recurring income would say it's my nonstop PayPal notifications going off all night, letting me know I've made money while I slept. But no, in reality, somebody said your greatest strength is often your greatest weakness. And so I'm a big proponent for under-promising and over-delivering, just blowing people's minds, exceeding expectations. But that also can become the greatest weakness. And so then, I stay up at night obsessing about how to exceed people's expectations. Whether it was my work as a designer, for 25 years, obsessing over details and staying up late at night, making sure that every little, I was dotted, T was crossed, those kind of things. And so, it's only been recently that I've really owned the idea that I'm a perfectionist. And so as I'm, kind of embracing that and going, okay, yeah, this is true of me. I never thought that fit because I didn't consider myself a perfectionist when it came to my dealings with other people. And but when it came to my own work, everything had to be absolutely perfect. And so while that can be seen as a strength, I think that's a huge weakness. And that's what keeps me up at night is, stressing and obsessing about, making sure that every detail is handled properly. Yeah. So you got to learn to chill.
If something's going to keep you awake at night, that's probably one of the good things that's going to keep you up at night because you're conscientious about the value that you're delivering your customers.
Yeah. Yeah, and that definitely helps. And I think again, it kind of is the recurring theme, but it just comes back to the people. I want to make sure that we're constantly in touch with what their real world needs are and that we're able to deliver that. So, I think about what we can do with WP101 to leverage the relationships we've already built with these folks who've come to us, not knowing anything about WordPress. Now we've educated them. So how can we help them really accomplish where they're going? So I stress about the next steps and the next level. Where do we take this and how do we grow?
Yeah. What do you do when you're not working?
I enjoy taking runs. I've become a runner just a few years ago. I kind of took it back up again, ran through high school competitively, obviously, but just a few years ago, got back into it. And mainly because I recognized the need to have some kind of outlet, to let go of stress and kind of process all of that. And so, but I don't run competitively. I don't enter competitions or anything like that, but I run several times a week and do a 5K just about every time I go out. And so I can do about a 30-minute 5K, and I just find that's the perfect time to unplug and just kind of clear the mechanism, and so it's been enormously beneficial. And then on the other end of that, lest you think I'm some kind of a health nut, I enjoy kicking back with friends, a cigar and a glass of scotch, and having deep conversations and solving the world's problems. So,
that's awesome. Nice balance there.
Yeah, I think so. You got to have a vice, right?
Yeah. It's funny, I didn't know you were a runner because I started running probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm the same. I'm like 2 5K runs a week in about half an hour, and it's the perfect opportunity to just disconnect and clear your mind and come back with a new focus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I call it Zen running. I have several friends who are competitive runners, so they want to know, when are you entering your next 5K or your 10K? When are you going to, as if it doesn't really count until you've started, competing. And I tell them, man, I don't run in that space. I mean, for me, I run to where it feels good. It's a nice, easy pace for me.
Yeah.
Which, it's still a 30-minute 5K, so I guess that's not too bad. But but I just find that's a comfortable pace for me. And so it's more about just kind of being in the moment. And not stressing about, I know some folks, I've heard folks talk about how when they run, some of their most creative ideas happen and they kind of process things while they're running. And for me, it's kind of the opposite. I just want to completely clear the mechanism. So that's the Zen part of it for me. I find it's incredibly therapeutic to just not concentrate about what I'm doing next. And, so it probably goes back to that perfectionist thing,
Yeah.
being able to let go of all those details and just be here for a minute and enjoy the run and enjoy the sounds, sights and smells, and just be in nature for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, how long, we're both going to Pressnomics in a couple of weeks, right? How long are you going to be in Arizona for Pressnomics?
I'll be there through Saturday, I think.
When do you arrive?
Come in on Thursday.
Okay. Okay. Bummer. I was trying to tee up a run that we could do while we were both there.
Oh man, that would be great. Yeah, in fact, last Pressnomics, 80 and I were teasing it. I saw he got up early in the morning and strapped on his shoes and went for a run. And while I said I would love to have joined him on the run, man, there was no way I was getting up to go running that morning.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll have to do it another time.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's talk about competition. Some people might think it's a bit weird that we're having this chat on this podcast because some people would, and rightly so, look at our two products and think that we are competitors, and you're probably the only person in the space that I kind of even consider seriously who's doing something similar to what we're doing. How do you think about competition in the marketplace? What's your philosophy or approach to competition?
I think it was last year at Pressnomics when Matt mentioned that at that time, there were like 17,000 new WordPress sites a day being created. And so, that goes a long way towards, feeling or how you handle competition, because I feel, and I'm sure you do the same, that, there's plenty of market out there. And I recognize that what we're doing is slightly different from what you're doing. And I think, every person in this space probably will handle it in slightly different manners. They're going to approach it a little bit differently, a different teaching style. And that's going to resonate with some folks and not with others. And I'm perfectly fine with that. I think it's only, I guess having a mindset of abundance helps with that as well. If you feel like there's only so much pie, and in order for me to succeed in business, I have to make sure I get all the pie, then I think it lends to really nasty competition. If you believe, on the other hand, that there's plenty of pie for everyone, there's plenty of market here, and we're all unique and going about it different ways, then I think it helps in how you handle competition. So I have, on occasion, when folks ask, for example, if we have written documentation to go with our tutorial videos, which we don't have. I don't really have any plans to create that material, but I can refer them to video user manuals and say, man, this is where you want to go. And so I have no problem doing that. If someone really wants a face-to-face personalized training experience, I have no problem sending them to Bob WP, and he's amazing at what he does in that kind of face-to-face, one-on-one training environment that I'm not able to provide. So I think by recognizing the strengths and weaknesses of each of the products on the market, it lends itself to really healthy. It's hard to even call it competition, but kind of a healthy, collaborative competition. I guess that's one way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's just being at a WordCamp as well, the kind of open sharing approach of everyone there I've never seen that in any other industry. I've been to large conferences with 300 accountants, and no one's sharing information about their business the way that we do in the WordPress community. And just to kind of close that loop as well, I know that we get inquiries all the time from people saying, do your videos include how to download plugins and how to install themes and all that kind of stuff? And we're like, nope, we don't do that. You want to go and see Shawn at WP101.
That's great.
Can we take your videos and put them up in our membership site? And I'm like, nope, you want to go see Shawn at WP101. We know what we do. We know what you do. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's that attitude of abundance, isn't it? Like, I was talking to the guys from Woo Themes here at WordCamp Europe, and I said, if Shawn all of a sudden gave me all of his clients and closed down, I'd be in real strife. I can't handle that many clients right now, I'm not ready for that.
That's great. That's great.
So, how do you avoid then getting caught up in? There's a bit of drama in the WordPress space. Let's be honest. There's a bit of political stuff going on. There's people ranting on Twitter, and there's always a little bit of drama going on in the WP space. How do you avoid getting caught up in the WordPress drama?
With great effort, I think. I think it's really easy to respond. There are things that blow up on Twitter, and you see the blog post, and And I think it's real easy to jump right in with your gut instinct, but I think I fall back to something that a mentor said years and years ago, which kind of stuck with me. And that he said that if both parties shared the exact same information, then 90% of the time you would agree. So disagreements usually happen because we don't both have the same information.
Yeah.
So I think by extending the benefit of the doubt to the other person who, it might appear on the surface that you disagree, vehemently, but I think if you got in the trenches with the person, you really understood their viewpoint, then, you might say, oh, I see where you're coming from. I understand. Now, we may have a disagreement about how to deal with that, how to approach it, but I think that definitely eliminates the drama. And half the time, I just think, man, if we could just get these folks responsible for creating the drama in the same room, put a face to the Twitter handle, and talk about these things, then I think they would probably resolve themselves.
Yeah, that is great advice. I just want to talk about one thing. You and I have both been completely ripped off, like verbatim, our plugins, our videos, our home pages, our website themes. It's happened quite a few times. How do you, and I know you and I have spoken about this privately, but let's just, talk for the benefit of our listeners. How do you handle that when you see someone completely ripping off your intellectual property and your entire business model and trying to repackage it as their own?
It gets really tricky because the space, in which we're working is kind of governed by GPL and this kind of idea of open source. And as a philosophy, I support that. When it comes to actually my creative work, the video content, those things, they are protected by copyright. So, while I want my materials to be able to use, I want to help as many people as possible, as you do. But at the end of the day, if we give everything away, then we can't continue doing this. So, there is a process in place, and unfortunately, sometimes we have to resort to a DMCA takedown notice or something like that to help guide this person. But I've found in every one of those situations, when I reach out to the person, if I take the time to reach out to them personally, and like I just said, give them the benefit of the doubt, half the time it resolves itself because they didn't realize what they were doing was wrong. Now, that kind of blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because I would think anyone in business should understand issues of copyright infringement. Some of these things are, they should be a no-brainer in this day and age.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're not. So I think I always take that approach initially. Is there a educational moment here? Can I reach out to this person? And maybe in so doing, find a collaborative partner down the road. You never know. But so I have that attitude when I go into it, and it's only if somebody is, completely bent on ripping you off that, we'll resort to a DMCA takedown notice if that's what it takes. But yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky. Do you panic every time WordPress announce an update because you have to make new videos?
That's a great question. I think I definitely lose sleep over it. But, I don't necessarily panic. I mean, I understand that's one of the things that differentiates, our products from others is the fact that, we continually update them for each major release of WordPress. That's something over the years folks have told me has tremendous value and, helps differentiate us from other sites that we've seen, come and go over time. So they jump into the waters, create 50, 60, 70 tutorials, and then realize just a few months later they've got to redo all of those if they want them to be up to date. And most of those sites, unfortunately, will, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, will quickly resign the game and move along. So I guess, having the attitude that, hey, this is something that differentiates us, then let's jump into it. It's more of an opportunity than anything. It is getting more tricky because now that development is taking place in these kind of side channels, taking place in plugins, and then they'll be merged into core. It now means having to kind of track the progress of half a dozen different side projects. So it's definitely gotten more tricky. I'm sure you're running into that same challenge.
Yep.
I can see the reason for it. It's going to help WordPress to be more agile in their development. but it definitely makes it difficult because we have to keep track of where is MP6 in its process. What are the likelihoods that it's going to be folded into the next version of WordPress, like 3.8, for example. And so building your production schedule around that can be a little tricky. You kind of have to be super flexible. So yeah, we blocked out the time around the holidays, and we know what I'm going to be doing. I'll lock myself in my cave and crank out the next set.
All right, let's talk about notoriety. What's the as a not only as a commercial plugin developer, but also the voice of WP101. You, like a lot of entrepreneurs in this space, you've ended up with quite a visible profile on the internet and particularly within the WordPress space. What do you think is the best thing and the worst thing about having that quite public profile?
It's funny. I'm not really aware of that so much. I don't really run in the circles where I feel like, there definitely is no celebrity status. Let's put it that way. But, I enjoy when I go to a WordCamp and somebody, is talking to me and say, wait a minute, where have I heard your voice? And, then that's always a little bit, that's fun. So, most of it to me is just fun as far as the good side of that, being able to be recognized and connected with people that otherwise I would never have had the opportunity to meet. So, that's, I think, the benefit of that, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or, through the website itself or just people emailing or reaching out, that I really enjoy. So I enjoy being visible enough to where people can get in touch with me, ask questions, we can engage, talk about opportunities to collaborate, those kinds of things. I think the negative side of all of that is just this perception that you're on 24/7, and it's a challenge, because obviously we have to sleep sometime. Being a one-man shop means that I don't have somebody who's on duty 24/7, and so that can be a challenge. And I think the expectation from a lot of folks is that you don't take a day off. It's Sunday through Saturday, and you're just on all the time, aren't you?
Yeah.
And so that can be a little tricky to navigate. But yeah, so that's definitely the downside.
Let's talk about what got you that quite public profile, WP101. What was the impetus for starting WP101? When was the moment where you thought, okay, I'm going to start this as a business?
I think as I shared earlier, the idea for it just rose out of the need to serve my clients better. So I found that I was spending all this time, doing face-to-face trainings that would take, a couple of hours to go through all the WordPress basics to the point that they felt comfortable doing it themselves. So the idea to create the screencasts, do the video tutorials so that they could come back and ask, review sections that they may have gotten fuzzy on. That came, pretty naturally as a need to serve my clients better. But the idea to make it into a business, I don't think came until I started talking with some other WordPress developers, and I started sharing with them what I was building, and they said, "Hey, I need that for my clients, because I'm having to do the same thing, and I don't really enjoy teaching them how to use WordPress. I just want to focus on what I do best. I'm a developer, I'm a designer, I'm not a teacher. So if I can build their site and then hand them off to you, then that's an ideal scenario." So that's where the idea to turn it into a membership site kind of came out of. So that was birthed that way, and we just celebrated 5 years ago since we launched at the end of September 5 years ago. So
yeah, cool. So you really were scratching your own itch, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great thing. To constantly be on the lookout for those kind of things, pain points, ways to streamline. I guess I've always been a bit of a productivity junkie as well. So I started my design business in 1988 as a freelance designer. So over the years, I had opportunities, and there have been times when I thought, let's scale this, grow up, and blow it up, and hire other designers and bring them in. But when I've had those opportunities, I've chosen to kind of go the other way. And it's been a bit of a challenge, but to keep things small means that I can continue having these types of relationships with people that really matter, those one-on-one interactions, and you just can't do that at scale. So, scratching your own itch by keeping things small in a one-man shop, I also then have to streamline everything that I do and make sure that it's the best use of my time and the best return. on that time. If it's not 100% billable, then how do you do that as a freelancer? So WP101 definitely came out of that need to better use my time. Also, the need for my customers who, after the end of the training session, while they thought that it was great, and they said, "Man, you've made this you have a great way of taking complex things and making them more simple." That was one of the things that I heard a lot. That's great. But they said, "But I got to admit, it feels like I just had a drink out of a fire hose, because there's just so much information. What do I do if I forget, what we've talked about here?"
Yeah.
And so that was one of the kind of pain points. I'm going, "Man, what is it?" Because I can't keep charging them to, give them advice every time they have a question. How do we, leverage my time and create a resource online that they can return to again and again as they need to, and get refreshers on different points. So, yeah.
And then at some point you turned the videos into the WP101 plugin, which is so that essentially web developers or WordPress consultants could then give your videos to their clients so that they could refer to them in their WordPress dashboard. And that plugin was co-built with Mark Jakewith, one of who now is one of the lead developers on WordPress Core. So how did that relationship eventuate? How did you just reach out to Mark and get that conversation going?
Well, that's a great example of the power of leveraging social media the way it's supposed to be. So I had followed Mark, via Twitter, and seen his work with WordPress as a lead developer. So obviously I was familiar with him. But Mark had created a plugin called WP Help, which enabled folks to create their own kind of text-based, documentation right in the dashboard. And so let me back up, because this is not unlike the creation of WP101. The plugin arose because of conversations with WordPress developers who said, "Man, I'm loving sending folks to WP101.com, your membership site, to learn WordPress. But what would be ideal is if we could have these delivered right in the dashboard, and provide these videos right there where these folks don't have to go anywhere else. And we would be willing to pay, to have a plugin like that to deliver those videos." So, again, that came from conversations, real world needs, and then saying, well, if we're going to continue serving these people, how else can we leverage these videos we've created and serve them a little better? So, then when I became familiar with Mark's plugin, it functioned in a very similar way to what I imagined and envisioned for WP101. So I very quickly sketched out the wireframes and communicated to him what we wanted to do, how it was similar to but different from his WP Help plugin. And obviously, the biggest reason for choosing Mark is just because of not only his expertise on WordPress, because being able to engage one of the lead developers of WordPress meant that I wasn't going to have to be worried about bugs and things down the road that I would have to support. I knew that if Mark created it, it was going to be a solid product out of the door, and that developers would trust the plugin because it has Mark's name behind it. They would say, "Okay, cool. We know we can install this without, risking conflicts with other plugins and those kind of things." So it became really natural. But then the other thing was just his attention to detail and his excellence. And he's just amazing, at the way that he handled the whole project. And still, folks who look at the code and the plugin, who are very experienced plugin developers themselves, just say, "Man, I just learned something from Mark by looking at the code for your plugins." So he's just that good, and so it was natural to use him for that, and it's been great.
Awesome. How did you find your first batch of customers? How did you start marketing the plugin?
The marketing we did primarily was for WP101.com, and what I found, we spent tens of thousands of dollars on AdWords is what we did initially. So,
wow.
Trying to get those eyeballs on WP101.com, and it was difficult getting traction early on. So, I'm not kidding. We spent just a tremendous amount of money on WP101 early on, just trying to get eyeballs. But pretty soon after that, I started attending WordCamps because, again, I really believe strongly in the power of building relationships. So started attending WordCamps. We sponsored a couple of WordCamps, and that gave us an opportunity to have conversations with people and introduce them to the product. So the WP101.com is definitely where we spent the most of our marketing efforts. The plugin itself has actually been marketed largely by word of mouth. And that's happened because of relationships that we've maintained over the years with WordPress developers who love the product enough that they're going out and telling other people about it. I've sat in WordCamp sessions and heard developers talking about the tools that they use, to train their clients and how to use Word, and they recommend WP101, which is amazing. So that's all come out of relationships. And if I had to choose one or the other, spending tens of thousands of dollars for pay-per-click advertising or the power of, referrals and relationships, I would choose that route every time. So
Yeah.
we don't spend that same amount of money anymore with AdWords.
And so, what was the main goal behind? There's this. I'm just coming off WordCamp Europe as well. I heard this conversation so many times. What was the main goal behind having a plugin with recurring revenue? Was it to get out of doing client work? Was it to have some recurring revenue to give you a bit of security? What was the main goal behind that kind of model?
I think I lost your audio there right at the end, but I think I get the gist of it.
Okay. So what?
Yeah.
What was the main goal behind having that recurring revenue model? Was it so that you could get rid of client work?
No, absolutely not. In fact, I maintained both. It has only been in the last year and a half that I was able to scale back dramatically on the client work that I take on, and primarily focus on WP101. So for the first several years, it was a side project, and I continued doing client work. And honestly, my goal wasn't to make passive recurring income. And a lot of folks go into it with that kind of mindset. They want to get out of doing client work and create a product. And that's kind of the holy grail, is to have that product that makes money while you sleep. And I recognize the value in that. But for me, I've always been driven in, and I'm not saying this to be pretentious or get on a high horse, but I really enjoy getting in the trenches with folks and helping them figure out where they're going and then helping them get there. And so WP101 became a natural way for me to do that. Yes, it increased my bandwidth because there was only so much time that I could spend doing face-to-face one-on-one client training. And so by creating the tutorials, now I could send my client to these tutorials. They could watch them on their own time, but ultimately they came back to me. And then I was able to spend my time really building the relationship and serving them in ways that that only I could do uniquely. So I'm still about that. And WP101 has been great in that I think it accomplishes a lot of the same purpose as my freelance design work. So these days, I have yet to shut down my design business. I still have it open, and I still take on some projects here and there, but it has enabled me to become much more selective in the projects that I take on, and then to charge rates that I think my time is worth and my expertise these days. So it's a couple of those are side benefits to me. But the goal wasn't initially to create a product that enabled me to make money while I sleep. And I think that's a little bit of a misnomer because every one of those folks who sign up are also needing help, needing support. You're going to have interactions with them. So I just look at it as a way for me to increase my bandwidth and connect with more people that I otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to connect with.
Yeah, I heard someone say recently there's no such thing as passive income. There's recurring income, but there's no such thing as passive income.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about freelancing for a minute. As you know, WP Elevation is our business accelerator program, which helps WordPress freelancers build a better business. You have a lot of experience as a freelancer with Left Lane Designs, which was your design freelance business. So, quick round of how to elevate. What's the number one thing any freelancer or consultant needs to know?
That's a tricky one. I mean, how do you come down with the one? I would say something that's helped me is remembering that it's not about you. It's about the person at the other end. And I really do mean that. I mean, I think if you focus on your product and your service all the time, then all you're trying to find is there an opportunity here for me to sell my product or service? And if there's not, then I move along, right? So I think if you focus on people first, not your product or your service, but you really focus on the people and what are their needs, where are you going and what is it that you see yourself doing, in a few years, and how can I help you do that? I think as an attitude, that works, for freelancers. It definitely served me, and continues to, because it guides and informs everything that I do is around that principle, by focusing on people and not your product and service.
Right on. What's the best thing you've ever done to find new clients?
Honestly, I think it's blow your current customer's mind. I think if you can exceed every expectation, then you're going to turn them into your most avid salespeople. So I take every opportunity to make sure that we, deliver what we say we're going to deliver, when we say we're going to do it. So I think that integrity is a big thing, but I think in terms of finding new customers, do everything you can to blow your current customers' mind so that they turn around and they want to tell, 10, 15 of their best friends and colleagues. Honestly, that's the best way I think to go about finding new customers. Engage your current audience.
Great advice. How do you stop competing on price?
And that is another tricky one, isn't it? I think to some extent, WP101, we still do compete somewhat on price, in that there's a current level. There's a level that I think the market will support for this type of training, this level of training. So to some extent, I think when we're talking about products and services, it is important to charge based on the value of what you're delivering. But I think you have to be careful to balance that with what the market will bear, because folks haven't had the opportunity yet to experience your product and have their mind blown. And if they just see the sticker up front, then a lot of times they're going to bail. So this is the reason why we provide some of our videos for free, because I want you to be able to experience and benefit from some of the training videos that we provide, so that it provides some benefit before you ever push the sign up button. So yeah, I think that's key. But if I kind of change hats and talk about as a designer, as a freelancer, I think a big shift there, as far as not competing on price, came in just becoming comfortable with your own expertise, what you can do really well, and knowing the value that you're bringing to the table. And that took me years, because like a lot of creative types, we tend to be more insecure and constantly looking for affirmation. And so, you tend to be more timid with your pricing, and you're putting out prices almost with a question mark attached. Well, here's how much I think we'll charge. And so something has to change at some point. After doing this for 25 years, I can't really pinpoint where that change happened for me, but there definitely was a shift in saying, you know what, I've been doing this long enough. I know what I'm talking about. And there's value in what I'm bringing to the table. And here's what that value is worth. Not just to you as the client, but also to me, in terms of trading up. I'm trading my time to engage and serve with you, to get in the trenches with you. So what is that worth to both of us? And if it's not mutually beneficial, then it's not going to be a healthy partnership. So I think that's helped, just shifting in confidence and knowing the value that you bring to the table is a huge key.
Great advice. Any tips on writing better proposals?
I think the best tip in terms of feedback I got from my clients was using a conversational tone. I think it's real easy to, when you're writing these types of documentation, to drop into this mode of writing and communicating that no longer sounds like you, and so they're having a different experience because they met you and talked to you about their project. They like that guy, but now they're seeing this paperwork that looks like it's filled with legalese, and terms and conditions and what is it? Yeah. So I think shifting some of that, to a more conversational tone, has definitely helped. I used some tools over the years. I used Bid Sketch for some of the more lengthy proposals, which was great because you could write modules and then kind of drag and drop those into a proposals depending on what the project entailed. So Bid Sketch was a great tool. But I think just the biggest thing is just remember to continue extending your brand, that experience that you want them to take away, through your proposal and all the other paperwork, and then just be crystal clear in your communication. Don't make them read is kind of the rule of thumb there. Just communicate concisely what it is you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and for how much. Nice.
And furthermore, including but not limited to. Don't use that kind of language.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Client says so and so, so and so. Designer says. If you can eliminate that, yeah, you'll be in good shape.
Yeah. Favorite tool or system for customer relationship management, CRM?
I think being a one-man shop, I've never had the challenge of managing hundreds and hundreds of clients at one time. So, in terms of tools, I've used Basecamp, which helps. My clients seem to enjoy Basecamp as a tool to be able to clearly communicate. But I also created on my own site. I would create just a very simple project roadmap for my customers that just had a series of check boxes and let them know where we are in the project. Am I waiting on you, or are you waiting on me for materials? That kind of thing. When can I expect the next thing? And by just having a simple page with check boxes that we worked our way down, the customer always knew where we were at any time. So I never really had the need for a CRM system in the sense of managing customers, other than the billing system we use, which is FreshBooks, and then just a good old-fashioned address book where I maintain customer contact information. But I never really had the need, I think, for a big CRM tool outside the scope of the projects.
Yeah, right. Well, I think just answer the next question as well, which is what's the best way to keep a project and a client on track? And that kind of one-page running dialogue of where we're up to sounds like a really neat idea.
Yeah, and it's the thing that my clients, after the fact, would say, what I really enjoyed most was having that online project roadmap. And they would just bookmark it. We encouraged them to just bookmark it, check it as often as they liked. And so that was a way to keep crystal clear, communications and expectations. So yeah, I think anything you can do to communicate clearly and make sure that the expectations are clearly defined, it does two things. One is it puts the client at ease because they know where they are at all times. And I think part of there's a little leap of faith, especially when dealing with the designer or developer for the first time. You don't know, are they really going to deliver what they said they're going to deliver? So by having that constant communication, I'm able to be at ease and know as a client, that this guy's got it. It's under control. Here's where we are in the process at any time. Here's what the next action item is. And so yeah, I think that's critical. But I take every opportunity to make sure that we're speaking clearly, whether it's an email, the project roadmap, in the proposal, to make sure that all the expectations are mapped out. The second thing that does is it enables me then to blow my customer's mind, to beat every one of those expectations. So by mapping these things out, they know exactly what they're able to expect. So when I deliver something that may not be billable, then they're blown away and they go, wow, he went over and above what we talked about doing. And I think, and here's a good tip. I started several years ago entering those things on the final invoice as no bill items. So anything that I did that was outside the scope of the project, I made sure that the client knew, here's what it is that I did for you outside that scope. Here's what that's normally worth. You weren't billed a thing for that. And boy, that's another thing that helped clients to come back to me again and again, is that they felt in every project, they felt they were getting more than what they paid for.
Yeah.
So that helped.
That's awesome. I think I know how you're going to answer this next question. Any ideas for getting referrals from your existing clients?
Have I already said it enough times, I think, so far? Yeah.
Blow their mind.
Again, just blow their minds, and that's it. Yeah, blow their minds. Beat every expectation that they have. I think Michael Hyatt calls it delivering a wow experience. If it's not him, someone close to him said that, and I think that's great. That kind of resonates in the back of my mind. I think about how can I create an experience that makes this customer say wow every time.
So how can a freelancer, what's the number one thing a freelancer can do to differentiate themselves from everyone else?
Sadly, we're in a time where integrity, just doing what you say you're going to do, when you say you're going to do it, and for how much you agree, those things can differentiate you from the rest of the pack. I had clients come to me again and again and just say, we've dealt with designers in the past, they were just flaky, a lot of them. And you weren't that. You were, reliable and consistent, and we always knew where we were with you, and you did what you say you were going to do. Sometimes that involves a little bit of swearing to your own hurt. So if there was an educational process, over the years, it was learning not to promise, things that just physically can't be done without me burning the midnight oil every night for 4 nights in a row. Letting yourself get up against a fence where you're like, man, now in order for me to deliver this thing by Friday, I can't sleep for the next 3 days. So it took some education. My wife was great in coaching me in that. And, she started saying, well, that's great. This is a great timeline. Now double it, so you have plenty of time built in there for the unexpected, those kind of things. So yeah, I think, in terms of differentiating yourself, deal with integrity. Don't be flaky. That by itself can differentiate you from the rest of the crowd. Unfortunately, but leverage that and take advantage of it. Gives you the opportunity to focus on the relationship with the customer and not just the scope of the project or the sale of your product or service.
Yeah, it's true. It's so true. Like, it kind of is sad that the best way to differentiate yourself is to not be flaky, but it's so true because every time we deal with clients, we hear horror stories of guys I've worked with in the past that got halfway through a project and disappeared to go, backpacking through Thailand and Vietnam, and they never heard from them again.
Right.
And it's unfortunately, web freelancers don't have the best reputation of being reliable, do they?
That's exactly it. That's the feedback that the clients continue to tell me. And so the fact that they're shocked and surprised to have an experience outside of that is, crystal clear proof of that. I mean, just do what, integrity. It's the golden rule, isn't it? I mean, just treat them the way you want to be treated. And that by itself will differentiate you from a lot of the rest of the field.
Yeah. Let's talk about the future. What is the future for WP101?
I hope we're around for years. I mean, I hope we're continuing to help people learn how to use WordPress. I think one of the great opportunities we have, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that keeps me up at night is thinking about how we can deliver a kind of a next tier of educational content. What are the next steps that a person needs to learn? So while WP101 covers the basics of how to use WordPress, are we really helping people to accomplish the goals that they have in mind? If they want to build a blog or an e-commerce site, how do we help them get that training as well? So, I hope we're able to execute on that next steps, that next level of training material, tutorials and those kind of things, knowing that with every video we create, there's also the commitment to keep them up to date. And so that's a huge challenge, and it's why we've chosen to be very strategic in how we move forward, because we want to continue, delivering that same level of excellence that we've done up until now that folks have, come to know WP101 to do. So we want to make sure whatever we deliver, we can continue keeping it up to date with each new release, and so there are some challenges to overcome with that, but hopefully that's where we'll be shortly.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment and how that ties in with our competition. What's the for you? What's the future of WordPress look like?
I think when you look at WordPress right now, especially compared to what it looked like, when I first took a look in 2.1 or whatever that was. It's definitely changed. It's become more robust, more flexible, more powerful as a platform. I think WordPress will continue, refining the code base. They're going to continue expanding on the tools that developers need to really create full-blown web applications. So I see WordPress, at least under the hood, becoming more robust, more powerful, more flexible, so that it can power even more of the web, more than the 20% that it powers already, which in itself is mind-boggling. So I can see them continuing to do that, but I'm hearing increasingly more from our own members and from beginners, true web beginners. They're new to web publishing, and we're telling them, like you said earlier, that WordPress is the best tool out there for the job. They're already overwhelmed. And so the challenge, I think, for WordPress is how to continue serving that base who have come to love WordPress for its simplicity, or they've learned the ropes. Don't go changing everything such that that very simple blogger can't use that. I think there's opportunities for some of the other tools that we've seen pop up recently, like Ghost and some of the other platforms, who just want to do one thing well, and that's just help you blog or just help you build. So there's there is opportunity, I think, in the wake of WordPress growth, for other products to come in and fill those gaps for folks who just want one thing.
Yeah, I interviewed John O'Nolan last week for the podcast, which will go live in a couple of weeks' time, and it's really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how Ghost plays out and how it fits into the space, and there's quite a few other. There's Medium from the guys at Twitter. There's a few other really simple kind of blogging platforms that kind of WordPress was 5.5 years ago, and it's become more of a full-blown CMS. So it's really interesting to see where these tools go over the next 3 years, where WordPress goes, and where these other kind of simplified blogging tools go. Excuse me. Where will you be? Where will Shawn Hesketh be in 3 years from now?
Looking back over my whole career, whether it was in design, now with WP101 or whatever it's going to be in the future, I know that the common thread that runs through all that is I really do enjoy getting in the trenches with folks, helping them to define and clarify where they're going, and then helping them to get there. So how to help folks get from point A to point B. That was the case in my design business. It's the case now with WP101. And I hope, whatever I'm doing, I know that it's going to have that thread running through it. So, I hope, again, I'm doing WP101 for a long time. But I also recognize that, there still is the reason why I still continue taking on some projects here and there is because of that very need. It's the need to really just get in the trenches with somebody and work on their product and help them, see that get from point A to point B. And that still charges me up. I still get a real charge out of that. So, whether it's consulting, design, we'll see how that shapes out, but doing more of the same.
Cool. Okay, just before we wrap up, what's the number one piece of advice you would give any entrepreneur trying to build their own business?
It's very simple. Don't waste time answering questions that aren't being asked. It seems like I've seen, a dozen products come up even in the past year that seemed like they had incredible potential, and then they just flopped. No one got on board. And I think the reason why is because the tendency is when you think you have a great idea, it's to close your door, go into your closet and build this thing that you just know is going to be amazing, and then you launch it and nobody else thinks it's amazing. And I think that happens because we don't take the time to really engage the audience that you're really trying to serve. If you do take that time and you ask questions, then they'll tell you, what they need, and then you have an opportunity there to serve that need. So, for example, the WP101 plugin was never on the radar. When I first launched WP101, that came about because of the relationships with WordPress developers and designers who said, "Hey, I could use that, and here's how I would like to deliver that to my clients." So we went to work building that in the best way possible. So, I think it just boils down to one simple thing: just ask questions. Engage your audience, the audience you're trying to serve, and ask them questions. Don't waste time answering questions that aren't being asked.
Great advice. I really like the way you coined that phrase too. All right, just before we finish up, I'm going to announce the details of this competition. We're going to give away a $50 Amazon voucher so you can buy whatever book you're wanting to get your hands on. All you need to do is, under this video, leave your idea on what you would like to see in the WP101 offering. So if there's a video that you want to see that's not included, if there's a whole stream of videos you want to see that aren't included, what do you want to see in the WP101 offering, and how can Shawn improve what he's already doing at WP101? I'll get Shawn to swing by in about a week's time and look at those comments and award the prize. Sound cool?
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Hey, Shawn, where can people reach out to you and say thanks?
On Twitter, you can find me at Left Lane. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. Of course, WP101.com is the website, and you can follow WP101 on Twitter as well at WP101. We're on Facebook and all the other networks as well, but you could start there.
Awesome. And finally, who would you like me to try and interview for the WP Elevation podcast, and why?
There's a Genesis developer I've come to respect over the years. That's Bill Erickson. And I don't know if you've heard his name or not, but brilliant guy. Not only because of what he does as a developer, so he creates a tremendous amount of code and plugins and things that have been useful for other Genesis developers. He's really motivated to give those tools to other developers and help them become successful. But I've heard him speak in several WordCamps and meetups. about his business practices. And he's got some brilliant ways to handle, how he deals with customers and proposals, and some great strategies. He really helped me in managing the expectation surrounding client meetings and phone calls, and how to set a client's expectations about how available you will be during your scope of work, during your project scope. So he's got tremendous things. Not to mention, he created his own CRM system built on WordPress just to manage his customers. So I think he would have a tremendous amount of value to your viewers.
Yeah, I think you're right. He was I heard him on the Matt Report a couple of weeks ago, and it was awesome. It was mind-blowing. So, Bill Erickson, you heard it here. I'm coming to get you, thanks to Shawn Hesketh. Hey, Shawn, it has been awesome having you on the WP Elevation podcast. I really want to thank you for taking the time to chat with us. And I don't know about you, but it wasn't weird at all for me.
Not at all, man. Enjoyed every bit of it. Thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing with WP Elevation, man. I'm watching closely.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you at Pressnomics in a couple of weeks.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Cheers, man.